So yeah, Greg, thank you so much for sitting down with me to have this conversation about accessory dwelling units, ADUs, because you guys did a fantastic job for me, and I was so satisfied from just our initial conversations to every step in the process, and obviously with the finished product. So you're very knowledgeable, did a great job, and I think a lot of people, regardless of where they are in the process, if they're wanting to know what an ADU is, if they're kind of starting to contemplate it, or if they know that they're going to do it, it's just a matter of who they use. I figure you're the guy to talk to. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, Michael, thank you very much for having me. ADUs has become, my passion. I started back in 2016 before the laws took effect, and actually went up to Sacramento, met with some staff, and helped them to write or put my input, let's put it that way, into the legislation that was created. That was back in the beginning legislations,
Okay.
and have helped a couple of the local cities help with their ordinances and to help create their ordinances and keep them compliant so that they're able to stay compliant with the housing and community development departments of the state, and have helped to do a number of those things. So basically ADUs is all I do now.
Okay.
We've done construction all the way from industrial condominiums to hotels to strip centers to custom homes. But
Wow.
right now
Okay.
my focus is exclusively ADUs, which it has been since 2016.
Okay.
ADU for Life was created as an arm of our old company, which was Gold Bar Builders. ADU for Life is exclusively ADUs, to whereas the old company went and is doing general construction on larger jobs.
Got it.
So the ADU for Life is exclusive, and it's working out very, very well. Um,
That's fantastic. How many projects for ADUs specifically do you think you've done?
we're close to 80 now.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can't wait till we get to 90, because when you say 80 ADUs, it sounds everybody's going, what did he just say? So it's yeah, I can't wait to hit 90, and that's going to be this year. We'll be well over 90 by the end of this year.
That's
But what we do, Michael, and it's important for any of your clients to understand, is we will only build so many ADUs per year and keep them under control to where we're able to give specialized attention, make sure that we get on the job from start to finish, and you don't see an outhouse in front of your house for 2 to 3 years like so many of the outhouses that stay out there do. And that's
right.
because people are jumping from job to whoever's screaming the loudest. What we'll do is we'll take a limited amount of ADUs, make sure we go start to finish, so that we're in and out of people's backyards as fast as possible. That's one of the main issues, is that you have a construction project in your backyard, as
Right.
you well experienced. So we want to make sure that your peace of mind and peace of quiet have been restored as soon as possible.
No, and that's something I really appreciated. I was actually surprised at how quick that process was once, plans were approved and permits and all that from start to finish was actually really quick. Um, so I wanted to ask first, just from the projects that you've done, what has been the main motivator of people doing it? Because I know for me personally, it was for investment, because I'm a realtor. I tell my clients investing in real estate's one of the best ways to grow your wealth. I've seen my clients do that, and then I started to do that, and I was like, I need to have some kind of rental income. But when you're looking at the price that you can get and the rents that you get, I would have been looking out of state. And then you have to, okay, then I'm paying 10% to someone to manage it. And I was like, here's an opportunity for me to do this literally in my own backyard and be able to manage it myself. So for me, it was investment. But what kind of things have you heard from your clients as far as the reason that they decide to build a unit on their property?
Well, first of all, you're very wise to have practiced what you preach, and that's real estate.
Yeah.
I've been a real estate advocate since I was very young, and the investment arm of an ADU is quite nice. You have the depreciation, the appreciation, and a number of things. I'm actually getting my daughters involved in this type of a concept as well, just because I believe in wealth creation through real estate, like you preach.
Yeah.
There's been so many multitudes of reasons for the ADUs, one being elderly care, to where you can actually use it in a couple different ways that way. One would be to have caregiver live in the ADU because it's so expensive to live in the Silicon Valley.
Hmm.
So to have mom or dad or whoever, grandma, grandpa, stay in their main house where they know their friends, they know the neighborhood, they don't have to relocate. A lot of accidents happen for older people when they relocate. So to put the caregiver in the back in the ADU, which is a beautiful little cottage,
Yeah.
they're ecstatic because they have a place to live. You now have an on-site caregiver. Now they don't have to be 24 hours a day, obviously. They could work other jobs at the same time as
Sure.
well. But there's somebody on the property, and you can always have that phone call to them and say, "Hey, could you go check on mom or dad, and, or friend or whoever?" And
Sure.
so the elder care is one way. A lot of older people now are actually moving into the ADUs and letting their adult children move into the main house because of costs of living in the Silicon Valley.
Okay.
The adult children want to stay there and the grandchildren want to come, and
Right.
it works out incredibly well for the senior to go and move into a smaller area because they don't need all the accumulated stuff that you accumulate as you get older, and they have their children. Another aspect which has been very, very prevalent is to take adult children that have special needs, and we're actually creating a unit on the property so that the family is in the main house, and the adult child with special needs live in the ADU, or again, vice versa.
Got it.
Sometimes we do an attached unit for that. Sometimes we do a detached, depending on the needs of the person moving into the ADU. That's been a very, very large staple in what we've been doing to keep the families together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing is to investment, like we talked about, special needs, like we talked about. Um, some are for families that just want to have a little compound. And so by living together, they're able to support each other like they used to do. Families used to live together all the time. My great grandmother lived with my grandmother and my dad when my dad was raised. And, the demographic has changed such to where we became very um, detached from the family unit. And it seems to be that people are going back to the family unit, wanting to have multi-generational housing, which just works because you literally have your own house at that point.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
There's some additional laws that are coming into effect. There's a planning commissioner I built multiple, many, many ADUs for now, and we're helping to build more for them. They're using SB9, and what they've done on this most recent project that we're working on is they actually converted the main house into a duplex.
Oh,
And we
interesting.
added an ADU, but by statute, we're able to now add another ADU because they converted under SB9 the main residence into a duplex.
Okay.
So when you have a duplex, you're able to sit there and add 2 ADUs to the property.
Wow.
So
Okay.
a single family in this particular instance is now turning into 4 units. So
Wow.
2
Interesting.
ADU cottages and a duplex up front. So
Okay. So that, I mean, if you have, yeah, like you said, a big family compounder, you're really looking to maximize your rental income.
oh,
That seems like a
absolutely.
great thing to use.
Yeah, she's brilliant. She's analyzed it backwards and forwards and looked at the numbers, and um, keeps calling. And
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, yesterday she called and said, "Hey, Greg, I've got another property I'm looking at in addition." And I go, "Okay, let's take a look and see what we're up against." So
So how has that changed over time? Because in terms of the laws that have come to make this easier to build these kinds of units, because I remember looking at properties and even recently looking at ones where they'd done like the pool house, but purposefully kept out the oven because they couldn't have it be a livable space. And that's how a lot of cities and counties treated it as the time at the time. And it seems like now they're much more flexible in general. And so I guess what's the cause of why they've become more flexible, and does it depend on what city you're in?
a lot of it does depend on what city you're in because each ordinance is different in each city. But the main premise is going to be the same, and that's dictated by the statutes that have been written around ADUs. In the beginning of ADUs, they had 120 days to approve or deny your project. It's down to 60 days now. I haven't
Okay.
seen a lot of cities or counties meet that, but they're sure some of them are trying very much harder than others. As far as we built a subdivision, and it was 800-acre subdivision. And in that, when we built our speculation houses, or the houses for sale, we weren't allowed to put a guest house in with a kitchen,
Okay.
similar to what you brought up. And so
Yeah.
what you'd have to do is you'd have to, make areas for the kitchen, but it just couldn't go in at the time. What's
Right.
happened now is that they really don't want to see a lot of those pool houses. They want to see it converted to an ADU so that there's additional housing because of the huge amount of there's over 3 million home deficit in California.
Yeah.
So what they're trying to do is to create housing where there was none in the past by using your backyards. And so it's gotten a little bit more simple in many areas. The nice thing is that I've worked all around the South Bay and East Bay. I've worked with a lot of the cities on what they're doing, have argued with a lot of the cities about what their ordinances are saying and what the statutes are saying, and have helped them to create ordinances to where people are much, much, much easier to get permits now. And that's another little topic, is that getting permits for these. I used to get calls all the time from homeowners saying, Greg, we don't know what to do. We're stuck. These people are crazy. And so I'd go in and take a look and say, well, they're not crazy. It's just that I've done this a number of times. And so it's important for you, for the understanding of going in and talking to them to see what we can do and figure it out. So I've helped many, many homeowners that get stuck either with contractors or with the cities or the counties to be able to navigate the system. Navigating the ADU system it's not easy yet, and I don't know if it ever will be, but a lot of cities are sure trying, and
Well,
some of
that's,
them are still trying to block.
I mean, that's a really important distinction, because I have had clients that they were knowledgeable about building, but trying to actually get plans approved and go through it, it's like you have the work knowledge, but not necessarily the relationships with city planners, and that's where things get tied up. And time is money. And I mean, that's something I really appreciated with you, was like, okay, who to talk to and the conversations to have, and the things that can come up that can slow you down or set you back. And I sometimes people are up for that challenge and see it as a cost saving thing, but I've seen it cut the other way, where how much money did you save and how much uh, you know tears were shed over trying to do it yourself.
The interesting thing on that, Michael, is that let's use San Jose as an example. What they've done is they've passed what's called reach codes. And so the government officials that feel that reach codes are important don't necessarily look through the cause and effect. So for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction in ADUs because they're so small. So by passing these reach codes, they're making the ADUs all electric now.
Right.
And what that means, in order to meet what's called Title 24, or the California energy mandates, you need to have what's called a hybrid water heater, which is a heat pump water heater, which requires its own room. So say, and I can't remember if that was involved in your unit
Yeah, I
or
think we do have the hybrid one, and it's
okay,
it's not like in a room, but it is in the side. It's got its own door.
got its own
And
door and own
yeah.
space. In the old days, we were able to use gas tankless water heaters, which didn't take up space in an ADU,
Hmm.
because the cities and counties look at that space, even though it's occupied by a water heater, they're looking at it as square footage.
Okay. Wow.
So when you have a 500 square foot ADU, it every inch of that ADU is very important. So
Right.
we would love to go back to the old tankless water heaters, but there's no electric tankless water heaters that will work in an ADU and still be able to have enough power to power them.
Okay.
So hopefully they'll refine them. But there are some nuances in each city, and some cities have reach codes like San Jose, which a lot of homeowners aren't aware of. So they'll draw a beautiful floor plan,
Yeah.
but they haven't taken into account the items that are needed to make it work.
Okay. Interesting. And from building too, I mean, and the approval in the cities, because you say some cities are making it difficult. How much input do neighbors have? I mean, because oftentimes you see the story polls go up, and then neighbors have the ability to comment, and is this going to be unsightly or block my view? Or, and I've seen projects shut down just because a handful of neighbors or even a couple neighbors didn't want it done. So how much say does a neighbor have if you want to build an accessory dwelling unit in your yard?
What's nice is that the cities and counties went a little bit overboard with their stakes and their flags and their things that were going on. What they've done with ADUs is they've limited the heights in certain areas. Certain cities have different height limits,
Okay.
which don't necessarily block views per se. It really depends on the lot and the
Hmm.
area you're in. But the neighbor has absolutely zero say in if you're going to build an ADU or not. They can't object. They can't do anything. They're not even notified if an ADU is going into your backyard.
Okay.
Whereas when you're doing a single family residence, they're going to notify everybody in the immediate area. They're going to, have public hearings. They're going to have a number of things going on. ADUs have a process of which it's approved in-house without any type of meetings or anything regarding that. So that's it's kind of eliminated one aspect of what they call NIMBY, not my backyard, because it literally is in their backyard.
Right.
Now, for the record, some of these laws I agree with, and some of them I don't.
Hmm.
But they all are put together to help provide ADUs in people's backyards. So there are some wonderful laws that have come into effect, and then some of them haven't been well enough thought through that they shouldn't have been implemented yet.
Got
But
it.
that happens a lot here in California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. So have you found, because yeah, I'm in San Jose, um, from the projects that you've done in like the South San Francisco Bay Area, are there certain cities where you found are more difficult either because of their ordinances or because of and I don't mean for you to burn any bridges with planners or whatever that you have, but for some that are easier to work with than others.
Well, I'll answer that without names. How's that?
That's fine.
So some of the biggest obstacles we have are fire departments, believe it or
Okay.
not. In fire departments, you're unable to, you can talk with them and try to get through to them
Hmm.
and see if you can get them to change their minds. But at the end of the day, it's life and safety.
Sure.
And so we have to support our firemen and support our fire departments. But sometimes some of their requirements are onerous. They're just excessive. And I'll give you a quick story.
Yeah.
There was one city that has cul-de-sacs that are too small today that were
For
approved
turnaround.
years and years ago. And so the turning radius of a fire truck is X. They said, well, you don't have enough room. You can't do that. And so what we did is we actually went and rented a 27-foot cargo van truck, and we videotaped ourselves turning with cars in the cul-de-sac and said, here's the video. Please explain how this won't work for a fire truck,
Wow.
especially if you have a fire, you're going to drive over people's lawns or wherever the heck you need to.
Right.
And so we were able to sit there and to work with the fire department to get the approvals.
Wow.
Cities now, each city can have their own ordinance. There's certain elements to ADU law that they can manipulate. Certain areas they can't. And so to try to stifle an ADU from being built is almost impossible for cities right now,
Okay.
because the remedy is going through the Attorney General. You go through HCD, which is the Housing Community Development Department first, and then they can refer it directly to the Attorney General, who will go after the cities if they don't comply with ADU statutes.
Okay.
So that has a little bit of bite into it now, where it didn't in the past.
Sure.
Certain cities' requirements, a lot of them have been fixed, Michael. A lot of them have been fixed just through us building in there and saying, no, this is the law, this is what it is, and
Right.
them realizing and doing the more research. Cities and counties are so overwhelmed and understaffed that they don't have a lot of time to do the research to see exactly what's said. And a lot of times they're very gracious in hearing about it. Sometimes they're not. But overall, they're open to listening and being able to help them to create a good ordinance for the ADUs. Some of the cities, yes, are very difficult. They require surveys and very expensive items to build an ADU. So some cities and some areas, some counties even, require excessive amounts of documentation and paperwork prior to, including geotechnical reports, which can run $5,000, including, let's see, you'd have geotechnical reports, you'd have surveys, an actual site survey. You know, you have your fences there and they've been there forever. So site survey isn't necessarily necessary, especially if you have extra room and you're giving extra areas for the ADU, but they still require it. And different documentation that can make the ADU a lot more expensive than necessary. We're building one right now, and I will say that the fire department did work with us, and that's up in Alameda County.
Okay.
And up there, the ADU's in what's called an SRA, or state responsibility area, which is a high fire danger area. And so they're making us surround the entire ADU with 6-foot wide concrete. So you're looking at $25,000,
Yeah.
you know, just to have a real nice sidewalk around your ADU, I guess. But the mitigation features, especially in WUI areas and parts of San Jose, you have WUI, which is wildland urban interface, which is
Okay.
another high fire danger area. And so there's certain requirements that get added on to the ADU cost for all tempered windows, special fire, they're called fire and ice ventilation. So if there's a fire, they shut down and don't let embers in. There's a number of things that go along those areas that can add cost to the ADU.
Okay. So just, yeah, if we're talking price per square foot, it could vary depending on what city or county you're in, depending on if you're, yeah, having to add all this concrete around it or more tests or inspections.
To add to that a little bit, Michael, it can also, and these are all in San Jose as well, flood areas.
Mm-hmm.
You have geologic areas. Some of the geologic areas, they make you do trench testing to see what the soils are underneath the existing. And so
Okay.
you may have to do what's called a raised foundation. And a raised foundation basically costs a lot more than a standard slab on grade foundation, which is all you need for a small ADU. So there are a number of caveats in each city and county that go into building an ADU. My advice to anyone would be to get a professional that has gone through it over and over again, to
Yeah.
sit there and to try to look at it. Before I even talk to clients, I'll do a site analysis over Google Earth and
Mm-hmm.
take a look and see what I'm up against. I'll look at floodplain. I'll look at a number of things that are important to talk about in our initial consultation.
And so, yeah, actually, if someone is thinking about doing this, then as I was, because I had a friend who did it, a good friend of mine, also a realtor, and he said Greg did it. He did a fantastic job, and then I met up with you. So say someone wants to do this, they watch this video, they're like, Greg, based on, you know what you're talking about, your company's done a lot of these. What's the first step?
Well, the first step is to get in contact with us. We're ADU4LIFE, and the 4 is the number 4, so it's ADU4LIFE.com. On there, fill out the contact form, and what that does is it gets me to take a look at your site and do a little bit of analysis before we talk.
Sure.
Once we talk, once I have that done, I'll give you a call. Sometimes I can have it done same day. Other times it may be a couple of days, depending on what our field schedule is and what we have for inspections that week. And once we have that together, then we're able to have a really intelligent conversation about what the next steps are, as far as the initial step. But the first step is give me that information and I'll help you out.
Right.
And it is important that they do fill that out, because there's a lot of people that are not too serious about it. They just want to know what prices are and things like that. So it is required from us. All of our business has been referral business. So basically it's important for us to know that they're going to fill out a 2-minute form. So they're somewhat committed. And that's the first step that we want to make sure that happens.
Got it. And then after that, I mean, because we met and trying to figure out where to position it on the lot too, and what direction to have it face, and if we want to have a small yard, where that was going to be. So that was an initial part of the conversation, even before drawing any kind of plans.
Sure. So after we do the initial consult and take a look, then we sort of ask, what are you thinking about? What are you looking about? What size you want? We'll give you suggestions as to what direction to place ADU, where it would fit the best, how you could sit there and divide the yard. There's so many aspects that we have by building so many of these, we've seen it all, and
Yeah.
some of them are just incredibly beautiful and well placed. And so we want to sit there and share that with you. In the end, it's your ADU. So we're not going to tell you, no, we're not going to do that.
Hmm.
We'll just say, if we do that, it will cause this.
Right.
So if you'd like to go ahead, we're more than welcome to build it for you, but we do need you to be aware of all the ramifications or the attributes, the positive parts of building an ADU ahead of time. Once we go through and get that all done, we start the construction drawings. We're a design build firm. We'll build other people's designs and things like that. But what we found is the things that we design, we're able to save the clients significant amounts of money just because everything that we design is easy to build. When
Yeah.
you get some other designers or architects involved, sometimes, not always, some of them are great, but some of them are artists, which I think is wonderful. But an ADU is really not a piece of art. It's not like building a big custom home. It's something that'll be functional. We need it functional, we need it attractive, and we need to build it efficiently and
Yeah.
effectively.
Yeah.
So once we have the plans drawn and everything, then it goes to the city or the county. And by statute, they have 60 days to approve and deny. So if they don't approve it or deny it within that 60 days, it's actually deemed approved by statute.
Okay.
So that's an interesting
Huh.
caveat that's come up. And I've utilized that a couple of times now. Not a lot, but a couple of times when somebody's being a little difficult, we push for the statutes. Otherwise, we'll work with the city and county in order to get through their concerns.
Okay.
Um, the process after that, and I really haven't seen many people get through in 60 days, but and what they'll
Is
do,
that just more of, like you said, staffing issues of them getting to review it, or what's the holdup with that?
that's part of it. And the other part is that the draftsmen are very busy right now doing all sorts of things.
Okay.
And so when you submit, the first submittal goes in and then they'll comment. And it's very similar to, I consider it, I call it pride of authorship. If they didn't draw the plans, they're going to find something wrong. So what they do is they will do a comment period and they'll send you back comments. It can range anywhere from one comment to the sky's the limit, depending on who you have drafted. And during that period, then you have to go back to the draftsman who has to sit there and get the time to go and redraft the plans, not redraft the whole thing, but fix the comments and the responses. And
Okay.
then respond back to the city, and then they go and re-review it. Sometimes that can take 2 weeks, sometimes it can take a month. And so that can delay the project or the process at that point.
Okay. So it's not just, you're not waiting the 60 days in silence. It can be a back and forth of working through whatever got submitted.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's exactly what it is.
Got
Once
it.
we have approved plans, you go into the queue for build. Now, the way that we talked about earlier is we'll only build X number of ADUs per year. So we could start anywhere from 1 day up to the furthest we've been out was 2 months
Okay.
before we were able to start because other people were ahead. And so we go by permit. We don't go by when it was submitted or anything else. We go by permit in hand. So once the permit's in hand, that's when you go in the queue for build.
Okay.
Once we're in the build process, it's going to be anywhere between 120 and 180 days. So it used to be a lot faster. Our fastest was 62 days, and that was pre-COVID, and that was pre-supply chain issue, and it was wonderful. And we were in the homeowner was ecstatic. Everybody was really happy. But now we're looking at 120 to 180 days, and so the supply chain is still difficult in certain areas. Sometimes windows are difficult and they could be out 6 to 8 weeks, which is a definite delay. And sometimes different appliances, sometimes different things are out and not in the supply chain for currently available. So that can delay the project also. But our goal is to be out of there. We'd love to be out in 120 days, but it can go up to about 180.
Okay. How has that been? I mean, are things easier now from a supply chain aspect than they were during COVID?
Oh my goodness, yes. Back during COVID, we'd sort of betted on the come sometimes because some of the units we build multiple units because they're so designed so well.
Yeah,
So we ordered a bunch of windows and things without even having contracts. And so next thing I know, I'm a warehouse, and it's not easy to warehouse a bunch of windows and water heaters and things like that.
right.
So we don't have to do that anymore. So
Okay.
it's worked out to where we can schedule around the supply chain issues. If something looks like it's not going to come up, like the big game that the builders had for a while was, if one brand of windows wasn't available, you immediately search the next brand in the next brand to see who was done. And then everybody finds out that the X is providing windows now. So everybody go there. So then you'd have to go and find another route. But the supply chain's eased up quite a bit, but the
Okay.
inflation is not. Inflation has taken a huge bite out of ADU affordability. The same units I was building for $200,000 are now up to about 250, 260, and on up, depending on the size. So it really depends on what's going to happen in the near future with inflation, and hopefully it stops, or at least calms down a little bit, because it was crazy. I was building ADUs, and if I make a commitment, I make a commitment. So I built
Mhm.
those ADUs for the people at the old price, even though there was the
Costing
inflation
you more.
period. Oh, it
Yeah.
hurt. But that's what the clients expect was to be able to trust me, and that's probably the most important part of building an ADU, is the client trust and our trust in the client. And once you have that, it is so smooth. Once there's some sort of, if somebody had a bad experience with a contractor in the past or has been burned in the past, it immediately puts a difficult blockage for us to do what we do, because as you probably noticed, you didn't have to do a lot of anything or say, hey, what's going on here, or what's going on, why are you doing this, why are you doing that? It's
Right.
because that's how, that's part of construction, and it would
Well, and
just
like you said, that's why the majority of our business is referral, which is the way I work too. So it makes a big difference when, all right, I said I'm doing this and I'm doing this, and the client recognizes that and everything goes smoothly to the end.
one thing we did add to our contract is there is an escalation clause in case inflation goes crazy again, but we've never ever used it.
Okay.
um, and it's just as a to it doesn't it's not as painful to the homeowner as if we were to try to renegotiate at a certain point, and it's real easy because you're able to see up front, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so that's what we try to provide, is exactly what we say and exactly what's on the contract.
Yeah. And so what, because I remember like going back to the steps in the process of once we were in that queue, I think you had someone else that got delayed or something. We were able to jump up in the line and actually started sooner than what we had initially talked about. But I remember, yeah, the foundation getting dug and poured and framing and everything else. But from a, I guess, supply chain aspect and construction aspect, what should someone expect if it's going in the backyard and trying to figure out how long it's going to take?
Well, what's fun for a homeowner is that they'll go, once the foundation's in, they'll go to work one day and they'll come home and there's an ADU framed in their backyard, and they'll just go, holy
That's
cow. And
that's
then they'll
basically my experience. Yeah.
and then they'll come home, the week after, and all of a sudden the roof's on and the windows are in, and pretty soon they're going, holy cow, I've got, what did I do here? I have a house now. And it's
Right.
been so effortless
Yeah.
that that's how it goes. And so if allowed, project managers sometimes want to have schedules, but in construction, my schedule basically dictates, if someone's on another job and that other job is delayed for whatever reason or waiting for an inspector or something, I'm going to send them to the next job
Hmm.
in order to sit there and get ahead of schedule. So I never know what the schedule is going to be until pretty much that morning.
Okay.
And so construction is very fluid and
Yeah.
dynamic. So
Yeah.
we need full access to the site during that time. And once that we're done building, you move in. But construction is very, like I said, fluid and dynamic, in that if it rains today, guess what? That's messed up my whole schedule. So I'm going to have to
Right.
sit there and refigure everything, and we just don't have a set schedule. But if allowed, and if a project manager can release, we're able to sit there and make the ADU go up as soon as possible, and make it to where everybody's happy.
Got it. Got it. And I remember one of the final pieces, which, because you said, "Oh, who are you going to use for your the solar?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't think our usage is not that high. I don't need it." And you were like, "Well, too bad. That's the state requirement now. All new construction, including ADUs, you have to put the solar on," which I'm actually really glad I did that, because now it's covering our house and the ADU. And I've been finding, like, last year, I think it covered about 150% of what our usage was.
Sure.
So yeah, and
There's some
especially
new
with utility costs going up, I was like, oh, I'm so glad that that was required in this case. So
there's an update on that though, Mike.
okay, tell
And
me.
as of January of 2023, if your ADU requires, and this is going to be technical,
Okay.
requires less than 1.8 kWdc, you're not required to have solar anymore.
Okay, interesting.
So that's come into effect this year. And so even though in the past everybody was required, now they have made it to where it's not mandatory on these small units. Because what was most cost effective was to just do your whole house at that time,
Mhm,
instead of just
mhm.
trying to do a small system for an ADU. But I had multiple conversations with the Energy Commission about this topic and about other topics that were unfair to ADUs.
Yeah.
And so they have now clarified and made that to where it's not necessary if your ADU requires 1.8 kWdc or below, which in San Jose is fairly easy to hit. We just built 1,000 square foot ADU in San Jose, and it did not require solar.
Okay.
Whereas a 500 square foot ADU in a different climate zone would require it. So it's
Interesting.
really,
Okay.
yeah, it's really up to the climate zone. And
Okay.
so the Title 24 energy mandates from California dictate if you're going to need to have solar or not now.
Okay. That's actually an important distinction. I didn't know that had changed, but I mean, again, for us, it really did ultimately make sense, and I'm glad that we did it. But I mean, maybe if you already had solar on your house, it's like, why do I have to put this on the ADU,
That,
or just you don't see the reason?
that was the difficult part, is that the Energy Commission stated that you had to have new solar for the ADU. And we said, no, that it wasn't required on the main house. Therefore, we're going to decommission the main unit and recommission it for the ADU. And they're going, well, you can't do that. It needs to be new equipment. And it wasn't written that way. And
Okay.
so that was the battle I had. And and that's how this all started and evolved. So they yeah, it worked out well. I'll fight battles for clients that I have a very good chance of winning.
Hmm.
But when you're dealing with some of these large entities, and especially fire departments, like I said, health and safety takes precedent over everything.
Right.
There's certain fights I just won't take on anymore.
Yeah.
But that Energy Commission fight was one that I felt was very crucial to clients, that they should be able to use existing for that. Now it's still written that they can't, but it's also laxed in the rules to where hopefully a number of ADUs don't have to do that anymore.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess that's a good question then. What are some of the pitfalls and things to be aware of? And I think if you're trying to do it yourself, where you may not know until the note comes back of you need to do this, this, and this. Because I remember even trying to figure out the placement for the ADU in our backyard. It was like, well, where is the sewer line connecting, and how close are you to a fire hydrant, and things like that. Back to dealing with the fire department. Um, when you're sitting down with that initial consultation to figure it out, what like you said, you have this beautifully drawn plan, but it might not be functional. So your recommendation might, well, this is an aesthetic, but then this is also from a managing building cost standpoint, or even viability of that placement. So what are some things to be aware of in that regard?
Well, some of the things you need to be aware of are what are the easements on the property? Because a lot of properties have easements. And
Hmm.
so there's what's called, you can look at what's called a PUE or public utility easement, which maybe you have power lines running down the back of your property. There's a 10-foot easement there, which means you can't build on that 10 feet.
Hmm.
Now, what a lot of people don't go far enough on is that a lot of properties have an additional what's called a WCE, which is a wire clearance easement.
Okay.
So now that adds another 5 feet. So you're at 15 feet, but if you read the documents and you go through the documents like I end up doing, you're going to find out that in the wire clearance easement, you can build up to 15 feet in height, depending on the wire clearance easement and depending on how it was written. So you're able to build in that area. A lot of people would just be going, well, geez, now there's easements all over this place and I can't build. So you really need to dig into the easements and figure out what they're there for and what the purpose is. A lot of that, you do need fire clearance. You need so many feet around the ADU. Even though the laws are written as such, you still need to sit there and take those into account in order to make sure that you're not doing a life safety issue and trying to make something happen,
Yeah.
or triggering the fire sprinkler requirements, or triggering 2-hour firewall requirements, or triggering a number of other issues. So that's important. The other part is what is available for sewer and water, and how are you going to hook up to it, and what's your pressure, and
Hmm.
and all sorts of things like that. That gets a little more difficult to anticipate. So, you need to come out and do a test on the water and see what your pressures are and things like that, what your sizes are, what the meter size is, a number of things along those lines. The fire department in San Jose, we'll use San Jose for most demonstrations today, or most of our conversation. They make you, when you do a submittal, give a letter from San Jose Water Company that says that water is available there, number one, the distance to the fire hydrant, number two, the static pressure, and the gallonage going through the line.
Okay.
So if you don't meet the certain criteria, they're going to sit there and impose mitigation standards on your ADU, which could be, again, those firewalls or sprinklers, or actually in some cases I've seen them request a fire hydrant, which, $18,000 later, you have yourself a pretty little fire hydrant, especially if you have a dog. It's a good spot. So there's a number of little caveats that you really need to be aware of, it, or at least explore when you're doing ADUs. And those are just a couple small examples, because there's all sorts of things, like if you're in a seismic hazard area, if you're in a landslide area, if you're in a geohazard area. The first time I got called out on a liquefaction zone was just recently. And so I'm going to have to go through the Public Works Department to get a clearance. But the majority of San Jose, let's use for an example again, is in a liquefaction zone. And what that means is when the ground shakes, it turns into jello. So they have certain requirements to go into that. But when you have the whole area that way, and you've been building on it forever,
Right.
and you're in an earthquake area,
Yep.
you just have to be aware that, hey, if we're building a nice slab on grade, maybe we'll float right through it. So
Yeah.
a lot of different things to consider.
Yeah. Well, and that's everything that you're saying just brings up more and more of why you need someone who's qualified and experienced and has had all these conversations um, to do it. Because,
One,
like you said, you don't even know what the issue is until the issue might arise.
that's true, and that's one of the things that is really difficult for a homeowner to understand sometimes, because what the statutes and things say, there's still a lot of underlying issues that can pop up. And so
Mhm.
they're going, well, no, they're supposed to be making this easier. And we'll sit there and, here we are, and we're going to do this. And we're going to call the mayor, and the mayor's going to say, I'd love to help you. You need to go through the building department
Yeah.
and make sure it's safe and an adequate build for your particular location. So even though the statutes and the ordinances are written to help facilitate ADUs, it's not just a slam dunk of saying, hey, you can put one in your backyard. There
Right.
are certain things. And I don't want to make it sound like it's hugely difficult,
Hmm.
because I'm going to make it look as simple as possible for you. But that's like saying you're going to go and operate on yourself. You need to have the experience and qualifications to do that,
Yeah.
and you'll make it look very easy. But if someone else is to do that, you got a real problem.
Well, and that's why I wanted to talk to you because it's a little bit of how the sausage is made, right? Because you're making it look easy in the same way with like, yeah, people, selling a house is easy. And it's like, well, we're trying to make it look that way, but there's a lot that goes into it. But I think the misconception is they're reading articles of, yeah, San Jose is doing like same day permitting approval for ADUs if you get these ones that are already, pre-spec'd out. And as long as you meet the setback requirements, it's done and done. And then talking more with you and seeing the kinds of things that can come up, you're like, well, it's not really that simple. And I guess theoretically it can be, but 90 whatever percent of the time it's not going to be.
Well, right now we're doing 2 pre-approved plans to the city of San Jose. What's not stated in there, sure, you can do a 1-day approval, but you're not going to have that done in 1 day because you have to draw the plot plan, you have to pull up all the easements, there's a whole bunch of pre-work and drafting that needs to be done in
Mhm.
placement, in Title 20, or the Title 24s are done. But there's a number of items that need to be done to even submit that plan, because even if you have a pre-approved plan, it might not work on X lot or Y lot because of easements or something along those lines. So even though it's pre-approved, it doesn't mean it's pre-approved for your lot.
Right.
It's just pre-approved to where I'm not going to have to spend 60 days going through all the different departments. I may be able to go in there and get it very shortly. I have not seen 1 day.
Okay.
Yeah, even though it's claimed, I still haven't seen it.
Yeah.
So
Boy. Well, there's a lot here. But that hopefully helps give people a pretty good idea if they're thinking about it. You're saying usually about 120 days of the actual building process, but then the question is, how long does it take to get those permits approved and be able to actually break ground? And then I know for me, the delay in getting the final approval was putting the solar on at the time because that was required for mine. And the delay in that was just me getting that done. But I mean, yeah, thank you again because that whole process was so smooth
well, I
and
appreciate that.
and the communication was great the whole way through and it just made it really easy. And now I'm seeing the benefits of it. We have a great tenant in the back, and that was part of the concern too, is I'm going to rent this, but I'm still living here.
Yeah.
And ultimately we'll probably move at some point and be able to rent out the front and the back, but I wanted it to be someone who we were comfortable having in the backyard, which we're super happy with, and that worked out really well.
Well,
And
that takes you right back to that beginning of our conversation when we were talking about wealth building and how I feel you're incredibly intelligent for building wealth through real estate because it's one of the most stable assets that you can have. And
yeah,
so what's nice, Michael, is that you practice what you preach and you're able to sit there and put that in your client's quiver in order for them to make money or to sit there and look at things from the aspect of how smart and how intelligently you're doing things already. It's you're doing, not just talking.
yeah, and that's the way. I mean, especially being in San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley, it's when you look at these kinds of numbers for investment, well, maybe it doesn't apply to every part of the country, but for this area, it most certainly does
Absolutely.
and will for a long time. So, but thank you again. And we had talked about doing a seminar where we can actually meet with people in person. If people find this valuable, we had talked about and want to make sure it still works for your schedule. Um, Thursday, February 22nd at 6 o'clock at my office in Los Gatos. Does that still work for you?
Absolutely. That's part of that's actually the most enjoyable part of some of my job. I enjoy all of it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it day in and day out. But the going and meeting the people and answering their questions and their concerns and things like that. If they use us, great. If they don't use us, great. I'll help you out no matter what.
Yeah.
As long as they're coming from you, Michael, I have no problem knowing that they're good people that have a good goal in mind. So with that, I look forward to doing that and having me there. I appreciate it. It's just fun for me as well as it's very educational for the people that'll be there.
Yeah. No, and that's the reason I love doing it too. Because like I'm having this conversation more and more with people who are looking to do it for all kinds of reasons. And I know you can watch the video and get a certain amount of context, but hey, I have a specific question, or I live here, or yeah, wanting more details. So I'll put the details for that in the description, and people can RSVP. But hopefully that'll be a really productive thing for people to come and ask questions and experience the knowledge that you have firsthand. So
Well, I appreciate that. It's once I dive into something, I dive really hard. And
I
if I
love it.
can't answer a question, I'll probably find out the answer for you pretty quick.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you again, Greg.
Have a great day, Michael. And once again, we're ADU for life. So if you need something, let me know.
Yeah, and I'll put your details in the description as well.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.